Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Premier David Makura, fellow members of the Executive Council, Chief Whip, leaders of political parties, members of the Provincial Legislature, MMCs of Finance and councillors, representatives from the Auditor General's Office, senior officials of government and municipalities, representatives of business, organized labor and civil society, distinguished guests, comrades and friends. Madam Speaker, it is my honor and privilege to present to this House the second budget of the 6th administration as well as our medium-term projections for the next 3 years. Let me start by reflecting on two important international developments of significance that happened during this month. I must do this, Madam Speaker, because the history will never forgive me if I fail to recognize them in this budget speech. The first development was the historic appointment of Dr. Ngozi Okoja-Iweala from Nigeria as the 7th Director General of the World Trade Organization. She became the first woman and first African to lead this multilateral trade body on the 1st of March. Dr. Ngozi, the former finance of Nigeria, took over the leadership role of the WTO at the time when this global trade club is in need of widespread reforms to address the challenges facing the world trading system. She hits the ground running and has begun working with the member countries to address the rise in protectionism that has been brought by the global outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is necessary to combat the spread of virus and open economic activity. As Gauteng, we welcome her appointment and wish her well as she implements key priorities that will improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the WTO for the benefit, in particular, developing countries like South Africa. Secondly, honorable members, this budget speech comes a few days after women and the people of the world commemorated the International Women's Day on the 8th of March. This is an important day that celebrates social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call of action for accelerating gender parity through 4 areas. The first one is celebrating women's achievements. The second one is raising awareness about women's equality. The third one is lobbying for accelerated gender parity. And the fourth, which is the last one, is fundraising for female-focused charities. The theme of this year's International Women's Day campaign was, I'll open quote, "Choose to challenge." As women of the world, we believe that a challenged world is an alert world, and from challenge comes change. Assessing the gender dynamics of COVID-19 globally, the World Bank found that in addition to health implications, the economic hardship of this pandemic has disproportionately affected women. Therefore, it is important that we acknowledge significant developments that are related to the ongoing struggle of gender equality and continue to work towards eradicating gender-based violence in this generation. Madam Speaker, last week Friday, which was the 5th of March, we marked exactly a year since we had the first confirmed positive case of COVID-19 on our shores. I still remember that day clearly. It was the day when I presented the 2020-2021 provincial budget to this House. When the news broke that our country recorded the first confirmed case of COVID-19, I reflected deeply on the essence of the budget I had presented earlier on. I then realized that our budget had suddenly become moot because it was not going to be able to respond adequately to the unfolding pandemic. A year later, Gauteng remains the epicenter of COVID-19 in South Africa, and our country has the most infectious from this virus in Africa. As a country, we have sadly lost more than 50,000 people to this virus. We convey our condolences to all those families who have lost their loved ones, and we pray for God to strengthen them in this difficult time. In the same breath, I want to salute unrelenting acts of bravery shown by healthcare workers and frontline workers in the face of great risk. They saved many lives. They worked long hours in the frontline trenches, while risking everything, and more particularly the health of their families. Some of these heroes and heroines unfortunately succumbed to COVID-19 with their boots on, but their colleagues did not withdraw from the battle. For that, I, on behalf of the Gauteng Provincial Government, would like to thank you and salute you in your steadfastness in the face of unfolding deadly pandemic. You did not desert nor despair. The fight continues. Madam Speaker, Gauteng's economy, given its size and the centrality to the country's economy as a whole, has received the harshest beating arising from the onset of the pandemic a year ago. Gauteng, as the economic hub, has been seen its gross domestic product by the region shrinking by about 80.9 billion from 1.1 trillion in 2019 to 1 trillion in 2020. Just too many people have lost their jobs. Businesses, especially SMMEs, have gone under, and unemployment is ravaging all our communities. But we are encouraged by the resilient spirit and resourcefulness nature that our people have demonstrated throughout this period. When the situation summoned all the scenery to pause for a measured response to the invisible enemy, we witnessed maximum unity across political parties, religious groupings, race, class, academia, scientists, and community members. All of us knew that to adequately respond to the reality that we faced, we need to work together. The moment testified to our time-tested story of proven courage and resilience in terms of crisis and calamity conjured by their nature and fate. At the same time, such moments continuously and without fail elevates our political, social, scientific, and academic prowess, which places us as a country to be a serious body of opinion in the arena of global theater of scholastic and valid ideas, tangible hope, as well as brilliance of policy and decisive action. This period was characterized by courage, rise, and hope, eloquently depicted by none other than Ben Okri, a Nigerian poet. In his passage, "Turn on your light," he wrote, open quote, "The most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering, where we are best defined by mystery, that we are still here and can still rise upwards and still create better civilizations, that we can face our raw realities, and that we will survive the greater despair and the greater future that might bring, close quote. The spirit of resilience and hope drove us as a sub-national government when we crafted and reprioritized the 2020-2021 budget during a special budget adjustment to resource the Gauteng COVID-19 response plan and address the immediate socio-economic impact of the pandemic. In the spirit that is characterized by our engagements during the preparations of the 2021-2022 budget that we are presenting today, which continues to resource Gauteng COVID-19 response plan, focusing on our priority areas, namely defeating the COVID-19 pandemic, reigniting the country's economy, recalibrating social policy, and improving governance. We are still riding the crest wave of COVID-19 storm. Hard times still lie ahead, but this time we are armed with more scientific knowledge, lived experience, and data-driven as well as evidence-based and multi-layered interventions. We have also started the rollout vaccine program, which adds to our optimism about clear path towards overcoming this pandemic. I therefore call on all stakeholders tasked with the responsibility of rolling out the vaccine to continue to do this effectively, efficiently, inoculate our people, and this vaccine is key to stabilizing infections in society, allowing for full opening up of the economy, in which in turn is important to an improvement in both business and consumer confidence and job creation. Honorable members, the global economy remains weak as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19 and subsequent lockdowns implemented in many countries to contain the spread of virus. There was a rebound in the economic activity in the second half of last year when these restrictions were lifted in most countries. But this rebound did not lead to these economies performing at pre-COVID-19 levels. It was also short-lived because infections increased in these countries towards the end of last year, and governments reimposed lockdowns to slow the transmission of the virus. This protracted slow pace of economic activity led to the International Monetary Fund to estimate that global economy contracted by 3.5% in 2020. The rollout of the vaccine, particularly in industrialized countries, has brought some optimism for the 2020-2021 global economic growth outlook. In its January 2021 World Economic Update, the IMF forecasted that the global economy will rise by 5.5% in 2021. Although the projection is still subjected to high levels of uncertainty, it expects growth to moderate to 4.2% in 2022. However, there are still risks to this economic outlook, mainly driven by new infections and the new strains of virus, renewed lockdowns, and uncertainty around vaccine distribution, especially in less developed countries. As Finance Minister Tito Mboweni said during his national budget speech, South Africa's economy, which contracted by 7.2% last year, is expected to rebound by 3.3% this year. The average growth during the outer years will be 1.9%, and an indication that the COVID-19 pandemic aside, the economy is still grappling with structural impediments to growth. Gauteng contributes about 34% to the country's gross domestic product, making us not only the economic hub of South Africa, but indeed of Africa. COVID-19 severely affected the economy of this province at the height of lockdown restriction measures during the second quarter of the year. Gauteng GDPR contracted by 50.5% on quarter one of an annualized rate by 17.6% on a yearly basis. Over 600,000 jobs during this quarter, accounting for the highest number of job losses in the country, and more people slipped deeper into poverty, widening the gap of inequality further. However, there is hope, because if the economy performance of the province continues at the current trajectory, our GDPR is expected to recover by 3.2% in 2021. Therefore, it stabilizes roughly at its long-term average of 1.9% between 2022 and 2024, mirroring the country's trend and further highlighting the structural impediments to growth. As Premier David Makhura said during the State of the Province address, Gauteng is leading in supporting President Cyril Ramaphosa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. As we are confronted with this prospect of serious socio-economic and environmental catalysm, we are not sitting idly and helpless as doomsayers would peddle this false narrative at every opportunity. But as this budget will reveal, we are firmly in the grasp and belly of united efforts to reignite Gauteng's economy, to create jobs, and meeting the basic needs of our people. The budget is geared towards supporting the key and strategic priorities, of which the first one is around acting together with all in our communities to defeat the coronavirus. Secondly, to place our economy on a path of renewal and recovery in order to create jobs, help to reduce unemployment and poverty, as well as closing gap of inequalities. In the words of Ben Okri, we have capacity to create new order, to overcome our setback, to endure the journey of recovery, transform status quo, to love and show compassion to the most vulnerable and the poor, which is what makes us greater than our suffering. We will not relent to the pain, misery, and calamity visited upon by the socio-economic situation that is precipitated by COVID-19, nor mask the incompetence, corruption, or greed. We can and will be able to still rise upwards as we are still here in order to create a better world and face our raw realities and still survive. We believe that the lessons learned during the pandemic will inform the delivery of faster, more efficient and effective services. This is critical, taking into consideration the diminished provincial fiscal envelope, coupled with the rise in the need for services by communities. Honorable members, expenditure on COVID-19 accelerated the fiscal deterioration that is already underway in our country. That is why Minister Tito Mboweni outlined a 5-year fiscal consolidation plan that supports the economy, job creation, when presented to National Budget to Parliament last month. These measures are necessary to narrow the budget deficit, currently standing at 14% of GDP, and to stabilize debt within the next 5 years. These measures are not meant to be carried out in isolation, and it is expected that, if necessary, structural reforms are also implemented. These measures will support economic growth rather than continuing with current trend of spending that is funded by more borrowing and higher taxation, which are simply not sustainable anymore. Therefore, our budget is based on the following key principles to ensure that we spend to the fiscal pressures faced by government and contribute to fiscal consolidation measures. A compulsory baseline reduction due to the 3-year wage freeze on salary increases for public servants, additional reductions to compensation of employees, support government's 5-year fiscal consolidation stance to reduce the budget deficit, reductions to goods and services in support of fiscal consolidation measures to stabilize public debt and ensure fiscal sustainability, reprioritization to resource the Gauteng Provincial Government COVID-19 response plan, realignment and reprioritization of the existing baseline to deliver on the adjusted GGT 2030 plan, shift of funding from consumption to investment to stimulate economic growth, protection of constitutional mandate programs and statutory obligations with efficiencies and reforms in operational modalities of these programs, improve management of the personnel budget, capacity of departments to absorb and effectively utilize resources, readiness of departments to implement and capacity to deliver on infrastructure projects. Honourable members, as a result of fiscal consolidation measures, the provincial equitable share allocations to the province will be reduced over the next 3 years. In response, we will look at various ways to enhance our own revenue collection, to supplement funding of provincial priorities and continue to deliver quality services to our people. Most of our revenue is collected from the following areas. These are the 4 areas. The first one is motor vehicle licenses, second one is gambling taxes, third one is patient fees, and the fourth one is interest earned on treasury investments. As a provincial government, we recognize that and enhance our own revenue collection lies in less in introducing new taxes within our mandate, in accordance with the prescribed processes, but rather improving the efficiency of collection from the traditional sources that I've just mentioned above. The enhanced own revenue strategy is due for consideration by the Executive Council soon. This will be focusing on modernizing revenue collection methods and eliminating loopholes in collection mechanisms, as well as optimizing potential revenue resources that are currently not fully utilized or explored. The Gauteng Provincial Treasury encourages departments to finalize the detailed implementation plans that will make all of this a reality. Working within this challenging economic environment, our target is to collect just over 20 billion over the MTEF. It must be borne in mind that the enhanced own revenue collection is unlikely to fully close the gap emanating from the fiscal consolidation cuts, but will nevertheless go a long way in filling the gap in the provincial fiscal envelope. Besides own revenue collection, it is now more than important than ever before to seek actively alternative sources of funding for GPG priorities and projects, either through partnership with the private sector, state-owned enterprises, other spheres of government, or through bilateral or multilateral development partners as a way of leveraging on resources outside the fiscus in achieving objectives of the 6th administration. In the coming year, the Gauteng Provincial Treasury will be finalizing the formulation of a framework for official development assistance in order to clarify the processes of seeking and receiving donor funding. Gauteng Provincial Treasury will continue again to conduct performance reviews of infrastructure projects under construction. This will provide evidence of the performance of capital projects and contribute substantially towards the identification of issues that should receive attention to ensure that value for money is obtained. Given the sovereignty-constrained fiscus and the devastating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy, it is now more than ever before that as the concept of value for money guides our activities. There must be a concerted effort to curb wastage, irrespective of whether it is in the procurement of movable or immovable assets or goods and services. Inflated prices, variations, compensation events, and non-completion of infrastructure projects can no longer be the norm. Expenditure reviews will also be undertaken as a way of analyzing deeper the prices paid for goods and services across service delivery programs and identifying areas where a value for money mindset needs to be entrenched, given that we have to come to terms with doing the same or more with even less resources. Gauteng Provincial Treasury will be working with the Department of E-Government to ensure that Executive Council resolution on centralization of ICT functions within the department is implemented in order to eliminate the duplication of applications as well as ring-fence of funds for software packages. This will enable e-government to properly exercise its oversight role as the custodian of ICT in the province. Furthermore, the Gauteng Provincial Treasury will ensure that cost guidelines to departments and entities that will pave the way towards standardized budget approach and processes in the determination of financial information. The guidelines will be applicable to all Gauteng provincial government departments and their trading entities, including provincial public entities, as well as in the Public Finance Management Act of 1991, which are those that are listed there. These guidelines will include all categories of infrastructure, information technology, leases, acquired of land, and goods and services that are being procured. Honorable Speaker, when I tabled the budget a year ago, I dwelt at the length about how the GGT 2030 would be resourced over the 3-year period and the new money that had been injected into the budget accordingly. I am happy to announce that these resources remain earmarked and intact, having been spared the fiscal consolidation cuts that characterize the completion of the budget that I am tabling today. Resourcing the response to COVID-19 pandemic has left the provincial fiscus with little leeway over the 2020-21 MTF. Indeed, the resource allocation process culminating in the 2020 MTF budget has been one of the intense contestation as we grapple with the reality that as a province, we too have a part to play in contributing to fiscal consolidation measures that will be implemented in short, medium term as one of government's medium-term policy priorities alongside economic recovery. I must emphasize that every rand in new money allocated in the 2021 MTF budget has sought to talk to the 4 priority areas of COVID-19 response plan that is articulated by Premier Honorable David Makhura in his State of the Province address. The GGT 2030 imperatives are in no way removed from the need to fight pandemic, accelerate economic recovery, recalibrate social policy, and improve governance. The Gauteng Provincial Government will be receiving 136.4 billion in the form of transfers from the national government in the 2020-2021 financial year, growing to 139 billion in the outer year of the MTF, and these are made up both by provincial equitable share and conditional grants. Despite the data updates to the provincial equitable share and additional resources to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a net downward revision to the provincial equitable share allocation as part of the deeper fiscal consolidation measures announced by Minister of Finance in his medium-term budget policy statement. The provincial own receipt account for 5% of the gross revenue available for the province to appropriate for its spending requirements. The provincial own revenue, although limited, plays an important role in supplementing the national transfers and resourcing the priorities. Therefore, departments will be required to maximize the generation of provincial owned revenue and explore new sources of revenue to mitigate the effects of the reduction in the fiscus. Overall, the budget I tabled today amounts to 142.6 billion for the 2021-2022 financial year and 143.5 billion in 2022-2023. and 149 billion in 2023-2024 financial year. Thank you. Madam Speaker, let me explain how we are funding our 4 key priorities. A total of 5.9 billion in the new money has been allocated over the 2021 MTF, the bulk of which will be focusing on defeating the COVID-19 pandemic, and for which the Gauteng Provincial Department of Health will be receiving 2.8 billion, largely once-off allocations. The existing baseline for medicine will also be boosted by 624 million over the MTF, while funding has also been allocated for the data capturers necessary to help facilitate improved performance information management, as well as ensure timely performance tracking and management at the coal face. Consideration has also been given to the vaccine rollout, which will be resourced through an injection of nearly 565 million in conditional grant funding. The Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs will receive a once-off amount of 20 million for the ward-based COVID-19 response committees, which is carried through from a similar amount allocated in the 2020 Special Adjustment Budget. Similarly, a once-off allocation of 15 million will be made to the Office of the Premier to provide the continuation of the contract of the learners that are staffing the COVID-19 call center hotline, which is an integral part of the response to the pandemic. Reigniting the Gauteng economy cannot be emphasized, cannot be enough to be overemphasized rather. Indeed, Honorable Premier, he dwelt much at length in his State of the Province address, pointing out the Gauteng City region is taking a lead in the implementation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. This can be seen in the continued focus on high growth priority sectors and infrastructure investment projects that will be instrumental in unlocking the transformation, modernization, and reindustrialization of the different corridors and districts of our Gauteng City region. Over the 2021 MTF, the Gauteng Department of Economic Development will be receiving an amount of 153 million, being Gauteng Provincial Government's contribution to the operational cost for the Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone, which the Honorable Premier described as a prime example of our vision of spatial and economic transformation and integrated of township enterprises, Black-owned, women-owned and youth-owned businesses into supply chains of big corporates. With special economic zones identified as a linchpin of the reigniting of the Gauteng economy, a once-off allocation has been made to the OR Tambo Industrial Development Zone, which is a key component of the Ekurhuleni Special Economic Zone, towards the funding of design for the bulk services. This will add further impetus to the realization of the vision so eloquently articulated by Premier David Makhura. In addition to the new money, there is already 14.4 billion allocated in 2021-2022 towards economic services and 44.2 billion over the MTF allocated to the Departments of Roads and Transport, Economic Development, and Agriculture and Rural Development. Roads and transport, through investment in economic infrastructure and regulation of road users, is responsible for the development and maintenance of a sustainable road infrastructure network, and not only contributes to increased economic growth and enhanced quality of life in Gauteng, but also act as a catalyst for opening up the Gauteng City region to development. Agriculture and rural development is tasked with a number of responsibilities ranging from harnessing to maximizing the economic potential of the province's agricultural sector and ensuring food security for all. Economic development will continue with the revitalization of township economies, proactively linking communities to economic opportunities by increasing the participation of small, medium and micro enterprises and cooperatives in the province's mainstream economy, as well as promoting and attracting trade and investment to the economy. Honorable Speaker, since the dawn of our democracy, the infrastructure investment of the Gauteng Provincial Government remains a fundamental pillar to deliver services to our people. Infrastructure is not only directly contributes to an improved in the standard of living for communities, it reduces poverty levels and addresses inequalities, but it also is a key driver in creating an environment that is conducive to economic development, growth and job creation. Over the 2021 MTF, Gauteng Provincial Government will be investing a total of 35.3 billion in social and economic infrastructure. Of this amount, 34.3 billion goes to the Departments of Human Settlement, Health, Education, Roads and Transport, while the remaining 1 billion is allocated to the following departments: the Department of Social Development, Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, Sports, Arts, Culture and Creation, and Infrastructure Development. Of these amounts, 13.8 billion will be devoted to new or replacement of infrastructure, while 20.4 billion goes towards the maintenance, refurbishment and upgrades of the existing infrastructure. Projects cutting across of the 5 corridors are allocated the largest share of the allocation, which ranges at 15.3 billion or 43%, and is mainly for the maintenance programs to ensure that the condition of the provincial government infrastructure assets, such as buildings and roads, is preserved. The Central Development Corridor receives the second largest allocation at 6.4 billion or 18%, and the remaining 13.7 billion which is 39%, is shared by the eastern, northern, southern and western corridors of our province. Over and above, the allocated infrastructure budget, which is Gauteng Provincial Treasury, will continue to consider projects that would be ready for delivery on the ground post-tabling of the budget. This is to ensure that the greater efficiency on spending is attained and that more and better outputs and outcomes are received with fewer resources. This process should be anchored in evidence-based budgeting for all infrastructure projects, and departments are required to provide the required portfolio of evidence to demonstrate that an infrastructure project in planning is ready to proceed without delays, cost overruns that are not compromising quality standards of our province. This approach reinforces the principle of protecting the infrastructure funding. Thus, in cases where the portfolio of evidence submitted by the departments demonstrate that projects are not ready for implementation, then the funds are ring-fenced and are only allocated when the department is ready to deliver. Departments are therefore really encouraged to place a dedicated focus on undertaking that all the required planning processes are done, provide the portfolio of evidence to enable Gauteng Provincial Treasury to allocate more funding for infrastructure. This requires that departments again undertake due diligence during planning phases, apply credible prioritization criteria, develop business cases that adequately address all the planning issues, and that the capacity and the capability to implement effectively and effectively exists. Departments should also re-examine the prioritization criteria to enable the maximum benefit to be derived from the scarce resources and ensure that there is equity in terms of 5 development corridors. Noting that the majority of the existing projects are in the northern, central and eastern development corridors. So we call upon all departments to consider prioritizing infrastructure projects in the southern development corridor and western development corridor to unblock development in these areas and create jobs. Over 2020-2021 MTF, Gauteng Provincial Treasury will place more focus on the following: infrastructure completed or handed over projects, but infrastructure cannot be used due to outstanding occupancy certificates, outstanding contractual agreements, and non-commissioning, which are the areas that we are going to make sure that we focus on. Reducing the cost of infrastructure, rolling out infrastructure performance reviews of all departments, and improving the credibility of information on jobs created through the infrastructure projects, as well as monitoring thereof. Honorable members, we continue to use our massive procurement muscle as well as our vast infrastructure spending as strategic levers to drive meaningful transformation, empowerment, job creation, and economic inclusion, including the participation of SMMEs, cooperatives, and township enterprises in the mainstream economy. Closely following on this is the resourcing towards recalibrating the social policy to improve educational and health outcomes, fight crime and protect the most vulnerable sections of the population against urban poverty and hunger. The Gauteng Department of Education also receives additional funding of 2.7 billion over the MTF. This is also informed by the critical need to ensure that the children entering the education system will get the necessary grounding in skills, without which they would live suboptimal lives in their adulthood. These resources will go towards increasing the per capita learner subsidy in both no-fee and fee-paying schools, as well as subsidies to independent schools, which move in lockstep with those to public ordinary schools. The new normal brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic has made it more and more necessary that we adapt our ways of doing things. A critical component of this is through the use of ICT to deliver curriculum, and over the MTF, a total of 1.2 billion will be allocated to augment already existing resources in the Department of Education baseline towards ensuring that ICT learning starts being rolled out to our lower grades. The Department of Social Development will be receiving a total of 84 million towards continuing the provision of care and protection of the homeless in collaboration with municipalities and other stakeholders. This money is also there to assist the department to continuously implement and monitor the implementation of long-term sustainability plans for these shelters, which are an added responsibility to the province and we have undertaken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Gauteng Department of Community Safety will be receiving a total of 92 million over the MTF, being resources aimed at augmenting the department's operational budget, together with a once-off allocation towards the infrastructure-related elements of the e-policing strategy. That is an integral part of the GGT 2030 priority, addressing safety, social cohesion, and food security. A once-off allocation of 66 million will be made towards Gauteng Department of Human Settlement to provide relief from accruals that have had a debilitating effect on the department's drive to realize the GGT 2030 priority in integrated human settlement and land release. Already sitting in the baseline for the departments that will be at the forefront of calibrating social policy, these are the following departments: health, education, social development, human settlement, and community safety. They will be receiving a total amount of 122 billion in 2001-2002 financial year and nearly 373 billion over the MTF. Allocated to these departments will be at the forefront of the social policy initiatives of the Gauteng Provincial Government. The State of the Province address reiterated the imperatives of a caring, capable, competent, and ethical government that can deal with the development imperatives, especially during pandemics, disasters, and systematic crises. At the heart of this priority, from the Office of the Premier, the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and Gauteng Provincial Treasury, the mandate of this department ranges from promotion of good governance and stewardship of financial matters, mainstreaming of programs focused on GOD projects, to support and streaming of government's programs focusing on gender-based violence, supporting the rights of women, the rights of youth, senior citizens, people with disability, military veterans, the LGBTIQ+ community. Cumulatively, the allocation to the departments that are at the forefront of good governance is 2.1 billion in 2021-2022 and approximately 6.2 billion over the MTF. Honorable members, to achieve inclusive growth and sustainable development, we must improve financial management, promote transparency, and public accountability. However, areas of concerns have been identified by the Office of the Auditor General, and we must attend to them urgently without fail. The outbreak of COVID-19 severely affected revenue collection in our municipalities. This has deepened service delivery challenges in local communities. So I urge all departments and state-owned enterprises to pay their rates and taxes to municipalities. As provincial government, we have a debt management committee that has managed to support the departments and municipalities to ensure that debt management committee that has managed to ensure that they support the municipalities and ensuring that our debt obligations for these services as current are dealt with as current as possible, as soon as possible. We cannot allow one sphere of government to owe another. We continue to strengthen our capacity to fight fraud and corruption and promote transparency in the provincial government. In this regard, the last week we published the 6th COVID-19 Expenditure Disclosure Report that is detailing how much money we spent in procuring goods and services that are related to the fight against the pandemic by each department. The reports also include the names of the service providers who did business with the state and how much did they charge. We release these reports every month and publish them on the provincial government portal for scrutiny by the public. We have made significant progress to decentralize the open tender function with the aim of improving efficiency in the implementation of the projects. Next month, we will commence with the phase 3 of this process, which entails the decentralization of the open tender process to 4 departments that are remaining and 6 entities. Those departments are the Department of Community Safety, Agriculture and Rural Development, E-Government and Provincial Treasury. The entities are Enterprise Propeller, Gambling, Infrastructure Financing Agency, Film Commission, Partnership Fund and Tourism Authority. Since its inception, the open tender function has awarded 177 projects that are valued at an amount of 29 billion. Furthermore, the Forensic Services Unit migrated from Provincial Treasury to the Office of the Premier at the beginning of this financial year to consolidate our efforts to work with law enforcement agencies, including Special Investigating Unit and South African Police Services, to fight fraud and corruption in the province. And corruption robs the poor if we are not dealing with these issues, which are the critical public services, and we must work together to eliminate this in the provincial government. Honourable members, I must emphasize that all accounting officers in the province that must be part of exercising prudent financial management and good governance, that is paying suppliers on time for services that are being rendered. When you pay a supplier, you are not doing them a favor. When you are doing, what you are doing is to honor an obligation that the state has to do to the suppliers out there. There is nothing that is disheartening than getting a call from a desperate business owner informing you that they have not been paid by our departments. So I would like to call on all my colleagues in the Executive Council to monitor this area very carefully and on weekly and monthly basis, and hold their accounting officers and chief financial officers responsible if valid invoices are not paid on time. Government is one of the largest procurers of goods and services in the country. If we do not pay our suppliers on time for valid invoices and they have valid invoices submitted, we negatively affect their cash flow, which is a sensitive area in any business, and in the process of effectively destroying their livelihoods and the jobs of the people that they employ in these difficult times. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, as the stewardship of the public purse, we owe it to the future generations to leave them weighed down by onerous debt that will make it difficult to fulfill the compact that we have had with the people of Gauteng. I urge the Gauteng Provincial Government departments to draw valuable lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic as a way of re-examining the way we do things currently. Strive for efficiency and cut wastage, which will stretch every rand further. Madam Speaker, our unity as members of this House is paramount to a precondition of a collective success, particularly here in Gauteng, on this economy for which it must see efficient growth in order to realize the future that we are all yearning for. The unity I'm talking about is not in the absence of critique of the present or dissenting voices or alternatives, but it means maturity to face each other honestly and openly about what is in the best interest of our province and her people. It means coalescing around their needs to eradicate their social and economic vulnerability from the fault lines exposed by COVID-19 pandemic in order to create a successful Gauteng province that best represent our passion and our pride. With those words, honorable members, let me take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Honorable Premier David Makhura for his leadership and continued guidance balances the need for fiscal consolidation and supporting economic development and job creation that is in your heart. Our appreciation goes again to the Finance Portfolio Committee and the Standing Committee on Public Accounts under the capable leadership of Honorable Joe Mpisi and Honorable Sochaile Kanyile, respectively, for their insight and oversight on all budget and financial management. Thanks to you, colleagues. My appreciation again goes to Acting HOD, Mr. Mncedisi Vilakazi, and the entire Treasury team for their hard work and dedication to efficient management of public funds. Lastly, I want to thank you, my family, the most important people in my life, especially my children, Anle and Tumelo, for their continued support in the work I do of serving the people of Gauteng. Madam Speaker, I present to you the following documents for consideration to the House: the Appropriation Bill for 2020-2021, the explanatory memorandum to the bill, estimates of the provincial revenue and expenditure, estimates of capital expenditure, the socio-economic review outlook, and a copy of my speech. Diabulela kakhulu, enkosi, diabonga, danki, paya, danki.